Eating carbs before bed, is it bad for fat loss, and does it stop the release of growth hormone, and does all that even matter? My name is William Grazione. I am the owner of The Educated Dieter, your health and fat loss strategist. We're going to be answering your questions directly from Instagram. If you want, you can go ahead and head on over there. You can follow me at William_Grazione, and please help us out here on the channel. Let us know what you guys want to hear from us simply by dropping a comment down below this video. So let's go ahead and let's dive into these. So number one, eating carbs before bed, is it bad for fat loss, and does it stop the release of growth hormone, and does all that even matter? So number one, eating carbs before bed, is it bad for fat loss? I'd hate to break the news to you, but it actually does not stop fat loss whatsoever. At the end of the day, what we're really looking at is energy balance, or calories in and calories out, over a 24-hour time continuum. So the reality of that is that you're either in a calorie deficit, you're at a calorie maintenance level, or you're in a calorie surplus. I don't really care when you choose to eat the foods that you want, as long as you can hit your macros by the end of the day, and you can ensure that whatever your goal is, you are close to those numbers by the end of the day. So you can eat those carbs before you go to bed, you can eat those carbs pre-workout, you can eat them post-workout, you can eat the majority of them in the morning. As long as it fits your lifestyle and you can actually adhere to it, that is what matters the most. And the second part of that question is, does eating carbs before bed stop the release of growth hormone, or IGF-1? The thing you want to consider when it comes to growth hormone is the simple fact that in humans, via the randomized control trials that we have available to us in the evidence-based nutritional coaching space, is that growth hormone in and of itself is not anabolic to lean body mass. So for what it's worth, I know that this has been a circulating topic of conversation on social media, but I'm here today to tell you that eating carbs before bed is not going to blunt your ability to build lean body mass or slow down fat loss whatsoever. And then another hard truth to wrap up question number one is that when calories are equated, high carb diets versus low carb diets, the results of fat loss and building muscle are actually relatively the same. So if you ever hear somebody saying this low carb diet is best for fat loss, or this high carb thing, whatever, the reality of it is this: it is calories in, calories out at the end of the day. Now, I think that there are a couple caveats. The first one is make sure you're eating a high protein intake. The second one is make sure that you're not over consuming or only eating carbs. And then you're also making sure that your macronutrients in and of themselves, your fats, your carbs, your proteins, and your fiber, are programmed specifically for you in an evidence-based range that supports all of your physiological systems of your body. Question number two is, hey coach, how many meals per day should we be eating? Now, just like in most things in the evidence-based nutritional coaching space, I'll tell you it depends. It depends on a couple different things. The first one is your goals. What is your goal? Do you want to build muscle? Do you want to get lean? Do you want to keep as much lean body mass as possible? So my general recommendation for most people that are looking to begin to start a healthy lifestyle is to simply say this: how am I going to find a way to eat 3 to 5 meals per day, and simply just start there? Now, maybe you're somebody that's only used to eating 1 meal per day, or doing more of an intermittent fasting style of eating. Or maybe you're somebody that skips over breakfast and eats lunch and dinner. Whatever it is, my best suggestion is to start where you are. Don't try to catch up to your favorite fitness influencer. Don't try to catch up to somebody else that's a professional bodybuilder or something like that. Just simply start with something a little bit different than what you're currently doing. Something that you can create a habit with. So again, 3 to 5 meals per day. Now, in each one of those meals, you would want a healthy quality protein source, a complex carbohydrate source, a healthy fat source, and likely some form of color via fruits and vegetables. Now, if we're talking about how to optimize the muscle protein synthetic response in bodybuilding, we're actually talking about trying to implement this meal frequency about 4 times per day. Now, in my opinion, I think this is ideal, specifically because the MPS signaling response usually takes about 3 to 4 hours to completely reset itself before you would spike it again. And most people are awake for about 14 to 16 hours per day with about 8 hours of sleep. So what I like to do is strategize around 4 meals. For some more advanced bodybuilding type folks, I'd say maybe 5 or 4 meals plus a shake. But for the general population, I'd say about 4 meals is ideal. And for the ladies, I would say about 30 to 40 grams of protein is ideal per meal. And for larger, more muscular men, about 50 to 60 grams of protein per meal would be ideal, which basically puts the woman in a position to get about 120 to 160 grams of protein per day, and puts most muscular men in a position to get about 180 all the way up to maybe 220 to 240 grams of protein per day. So I hope this helps answer your question about what is optimal for meal frequency. Question number 3, what are the best muscle building supplements? So I'm going to hit you guys with a couple curveballs, and I'm going to talk about some things that not very many people talk about. The first 2 you have heard before. The last 3 or 4 you probably have not. So let's go ahead and let's dive into this. I've got a list here pulled up on my phone, and I want to make sure that I walk through these specifically. So whey protein isolate. I think if you go with a normal whey protein with a full list of ingredients, most likely you're going to end up in a position where maybe you may experience some level of bloating or discomfort, because truthfully, a lot of supplement companies are cutting their protein and filling it up with a bunch of crap. So go with a whey protein isolate and try to find one with the fewest ingredients possible. Currently right now, the one that I use only has 6 ingredients. I drink it, it tastes amazing, and I never have any GI problems with it. Number 2 is creatine monohydrate. Now, I got a good question the other day from one of my clients that says, hey coach, my mom hired a coach, and the coach has her taking 5 grams of creatine monohydrate per day, tracking her protein, tracking her fiber, doing all the right things. And I said, well, how much lean body mass do you think your mom has? And is 5 grams even, the right amount for her? Because I like to think about it like this. I think the amount of lean body mass that you have should reflect on how much creatine you need to fully saturate the muscle tissue, okay? So if you're a 120 to 140 pound gal with a good amount of lean body mass, you may need more creatine in the beginning to saturate faster. But if you start with 3 grams or if you start with 5 grams, it really doesn't matter, because you're going to reach the full level of saturation likely after about 3 weeks. So if you start with 3 grams, it might take you a little bit longer to reach full saturation. You start with 5 grams, it might take you a little bit shorter duration of time to reach that full saturation. But once you are saturated, it can't go anywhere else. So then maybe you'll need to back that number down, because in excess of creatine monohydrate, in my opinion, can kind of cause your muscle cells to look almost spilled over, maybe like you're holding a little bit more fluid. Now, I have worked with very muscular guys before in the past, and in some instances, I've had to take them up to 7, 8 grams per day. I remember when I coached a world champion at the Natural Olympia, I actually had him taking 10 grams of creatine monohydrate per day because he was such a big guy. But most of the bodybuilders and most of the guys that I work with, around 180 pounds, maybe up to 210, I normally have them on about 5 grams. And then most of the ladies that I coach, normally it's somewhere between 2 and 3 grams of creatine monohydrate per day. The next one, I'm going to throw a curveball in here, and I'm going to say ashwagandha or KSM 66, primarily because it is an adaptogenic herb that helps to lower cortisol. And I think that for a lot of people in today's population that are dealing with high stress, one of the primary reasons why they are is because of the fact that they're not taking an adaptogenic herb to help them with the stress management. So implementing something like ashwagandha, stacking that with something that may help with testosterone reduction, in my opinion, can be a really good supplement to utilize. And I'm actually using the very same stack right now, because I'm going to be running before and after blood work on my testosterone to see if the combination that I've put together actually helps me improve my testosterone. So to answer that, we're going to go vitamin D3 plus K2, 5,000 to 10,000 IUs per day. We're also going to stack that with ashwagandha, about 1,000 milligrams per day. We're also going to stack that with something like fenugreek or D-aspartic acid. And that, in my opinion, will help to reduce stress, improve natural testosterone production, which in my opinion can lead to you building more lean body mass over time. Last but definitely not least, these are things that people don't necessarily talk about, but number 1 is going to be the importance of sleep quality, all right, and sleep duration. So I do recommend about 8 or more hours per sleep every night if that's possible. I also would highly recommend making sure that your training and recovery ratio is dialed in for you. I think a lot of people in the health and fitness industry are just simply doing the training programs that their favorite influencers are running because they see them doing it and they're a genetic freak. So therefore they think, oh, I must have to do that training program so that I can look like her. The reality is your physiology is nothing like that other person's, and you need to find a really good ratio that is balanced for you to apply stress to your body and actually recover from that stress that you've put on your body, leading you to a position where you're not carrying an excessive amount of muscular soreness and fatigue and inflammation from week 1 to week 2 to week 3 to week 4 to week 5, and then you end up in a position where, guess what? Now you're injured and you can't train anyway. So find a really good training to recovery ratio that works for you. Question number 4, hey coach, is intermittent fasting worth all the buzz that I'm reading about on social media? The answer to this essentially is, I don't really care what kind of diet you choose to follow as long as you can follow it, okay? Now, there's some detailed information that we have to dive into because I don't just want to say yes or no when you ask me a question like this. I want to provide you helpful information to basically help you dictate whether or not you should intermittent fast or you should not. Now, I will start this off with a strong statement, and I will say, all women in the perimenopausal transition that are experiencing hormone dysfunction should not be doing intermittent fasting. They should also not be doing fasted exercise in the morning. I'm going to stop there, and then we're going to keep on going. All right, so next thing you want to consider is this. Can you even follow it? Can you follow an intermittent fasting style of approach? Now, some people like to go 8 hours of feeding, 16 hours of fasting. Some people may go 10 hours of feeding, 14 hours of fasting. In some instances, I recommend a 12-12. So you're eating for 12 hours and then you're fasting for 12 hours. I notice that I feel consistently better in that environment where I'm not eating really late at night, like right before bed, but I'm also not waking up and eating a bunch of calories first thing in the morning. I like to have protein, fats, and veggies first thing in the morning. I like to have carbs and protein pre-workout. I like to have carbs and protein post-workout. And then before bed, whatever I need to do to hit my macros, that's my last meal of the day. Now, I don't think intermittent fasting is some type of magic. I don't think that it's magically going to help you achieve the body composition of your dreams. I also believe that I think it leads to a lot of stall-outs. The primary reason for this is because if you're only eating in an 8-hour window, then by default, you are kind of putting yourself into a calorie restriction. Now, why does intermittent fasting work? Bingo, you got it. It's because you're in a calorie restriction. You've eliminated breakfast and likely eliminated lunch, and now you're only eating at like 2 o'clock and 6 or 7 o'clock. Okay, so by you removing that many calories, don't you think you should be burning up stored body fat? And I would have to agree. I would have to say yes. By removing 2 meals, we are either consciously or unconsciously putting yourself in a position where you are now in a calorie deficit. And that is why intermittent fasting can work for some people. So if it fits into your lifestyle and you find yourself consistent with it, then by all means, just keep on doing it. However, I also believe that if you are fasting for that long, I think that there's something to be said for the fact that you may lose more lean body mass than if you were feeding protein throughout the day. So something that I like to do for my intermittent fasting crowd is I'll actually still have them potentially consider eating just protein at breakfast, maybe protein 4 hours later, and then doing their more intermittent fasting style of thing later on in the day. So it's a modified version of intermittent fasting, but in my opinion, I think it's more optimal for trying to build and maintain muscle mass during a fat loss phase. Question number 5 is, hey coach, what kind of information do you track? So over the last few weeks, I've been posting screenshots and video recordings on my Instagram story about clients of mine that are achieving amazing results. Monday, which was my first day of client check-ins, I recorded like 5 of them and it totaled like 90 something pounds of fat loss. On Wednesday, I recorded another maybe 5 of them, and I think it was like 87.5 pounds of fat loss. And somebody reached out to me in the DM, just like I asked for here on the videos, and she says, what information do you actually track? Because we're aware in the nutritional coaching space, or at least many of you are that have hired a coach before, what are they actually tracking? And so what I wanted to share with you is what information do we track? Because we don't only just track the date, your weight, your macros, and that information. But we also track what's known as biofeedback, or your body's feedback. So how are you actually feeling? And I know that in the health and fitness space, a lot of people just tell you, ignore how you feel. It doesn't matter. Push through it. You feel like shit, go to the gym and squat again. You feel terrible, go to the gym and train again, whatever. I'm here to tell you today that I think a lot of information can be received from simply just listening to your body, especially when you're working with women that need to pay more attention to their body and how their body feels throughout their phases of the month. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what data. So like I said, we do date, we do their weight, we do their current macronutrients. If we're carb cycling, we're using diet breaks, we're using anything, that information is in there. If we're working with a woman, we'll also track her cycle inside of that graph. So we'll kind of mark that as either a pink or a purple or a red or something like that, so that we know when she's transitioning from follicular phase to ovulation to luteal phase. That information is actually very important to me, primarily working with women, because then I know when does their weight usually spike. Because if I don't have that information, I'm wondering, why is her weight spiking? Is it because she's ventured into the luteal phase and maybe that's expected? Or was there something else that I need to pay attention to make sure that her weight's not going in the wrong direction? Next thing up after that, we are going to be tracking your fiber intake. We're going to be tracking your training, your steps, your cardio, and any specific daily comments or questions or anything like that that they have each day. Now, I will say most people don't complete that piece of it, because in the weekly biofeedback tracker, we ask all this stuff anyway. So the weekly biofeedback tracker is another sheet that we utilize at the bottom of our program, and you just click on that, and then it'll drop down. And at the top of that, it has what was your waist measurement from the week before, what's your current waist measurement now. A few other things that we're going to be measuring is what's your training energy, what's your daily energy, how's your strength, the overall health of your cycle. So are you still having a cycle? Is it lasting the proper duration of time? Is it a painful cycle? Anything like that. We need that information, because that information is actually very important for the overall health of the female client that we're coaching. And I will mention, we don't only work with women, we do work with men too, but I include that information because I think it's very important. Next up is the mindset. So that's very important too. So how do you feel throughout the week from a mental perspective? Do you feel good about this? Do you feel like you're not doing very good? What's going on? The other thing we want to track is your tracking consistency. So I actually ask our clients to grade themselves. I ask them to sit down, look at the data, and say, what would you grade yourself? Sometimes it's an A, sometimes it's a C, sometimes it's a B. So, or if it's on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe it's a 10 because they did perfect, or maybe it's an 8 because they think they didn't do so well. But all in all, we're gathering a lot of really helpful information to help us be able to coach that person a bit better, and also firmly understand where they are and what they're going through. Because I believe that a big gap in coaching is the communication and not actually listening to what the client's going through, but rather just being quote unquote like a number adjuster. You're looking at the macros and you're seeing whether or not they responded or not, and then you're making a decision based off of just the macros, but not how the client also feels. Or if it's a woman, what phase of their 30-day period that they're in. We also ask for any aches and pains, any muscular tightness, anything like that. And then finally, at the very bottom, we have a questions or comments section. Now, most people ask me maybe 1 to 3 questions at the bottom of that, and this is why typically we will respond with a Loom video walking you through answering those questions, and also highlighting where are we at in the first initial phase of the process. Where are you at in terms of trying to achieve your first goal? How far are we away from the first 5 pounds? How far are we away from the first 10 pounds? And then what's the next plan of action? And to wrap that up, I think it's very important to ask these questions, because we want to make sure that we can not only educate you on what you're going through right now, but we can also put you in a position where you firmly understand what is coming. I think oftentimes in the nutritional coaching space, a lot of people can get a client from point A to point B, but they're really never planning for how to get them to maintain the result for afterwards. Question number 6 is, what can we do to help you with the foundations? What can we do to help you with the basics? Because this specific client said, look, coach, I'm really not ready to start tracking my macros. And I can understand where you're coming from. I know that for some people, tracking macros can seem like a very hard task. However, what I want to highlight is we can still coach somebody even if they don't want to track their macros right now. But be mindful that in some instances, we do have to warm you up to being able to track them, because it's very similar to tracking profits and losses in a business or with your personal finances. You can guarantee a result if you're tracking properly, right? And tracking macros is kind of the same thing in the fact that once we get it so dialed in, we can guarantee a result based off the numbers that we're getting from you and what we are implementing into your program, that we should be able to see at least a pound, pound and a quarter, pound and a half, and in some heavier cases, maybe 2 pounds of fat loss per week. But without tracking the data, it's very hard for us to basically guarantee an outcome. But what can we do to set you up in a position where you are checking these boxes every day and you are building your confidence, which ultimately allows you to begin to do these habitual things on a daily basis, which begin to make you feel better, which begin to help you see the scale go in the right direction, which begins to help you lose some inches off your waistline? What are the most important things? That's what I want to talk to you today about. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's dive into this. Keep in mind that habits are what you do while you're awake and while you sleep, right? So these are the things that you do when you wake up, when you're on your way to work, when you're at work, when you get off of work, before dinner, after dinner. Your habits are who you are. Your habits are what you do. And the hardest thing for some people is changing what those habits are, because they've done the same thing likely for the last 5 to 10 years. So what are the things that they need to implement as soon as possible to begin to lay a really solid foundation where in about 4 to 6 weeks, they're actually asking their coach, hey coach, I'm ready to track my macros now. What can they do? So drink at least 3/4 of a gallon of water per day. I think that's very important for those of you ladies out there that are walking around with a Stanley cup. That's 3 of those per day. Walking every day to acquire 6,000 to 8,000 steps per day, I think, is very important. The interesting thing with walking, and I know that the fitness industry says 10,000 steps per day, but the interesting thing with walking is that in the research that we have available, there are significant health improvements from 2,000, 3,000 steps up to 6,000 to 8,000 steps, but there's really not a significant improvement in health above 10,000 steps per day. So they evaluated 2 different groups, one of them 2,000 to like 8,000, then the other one was 10,000 plus or even up to like 16,000. And it really didn't show that many more health outcomes. So what I like to say is about 8,000 steps per day, I think, is a really good ballpark for those of you who may work a sedentary job or people who work at a desk all day. And the next thing is going to be resistance training at least 2 to 3 days per week. Now, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to train like a bodybuilder, but I would recommend something along the lines of having like an upper body push day, an upper body pull day, and then a lower body day, taking you to the gym 3 days per week. I think that would be enough. And you could even keep your workouts down around 45 minutes, maybe an hour or so, sometimes even less than that, depending on how much time you have available to spend in the gym. The next thing is to eat a big salad every day. I don't think it's a surprise that a lot of people's diets in today's modern culture lacks color. So they lack the greens and the reds and the oranges and the yellows and all the various colors of the fruits and vegetables that we have available to us. But if you shop around the outside perimeter of the grocery store, chances are you're going to end up buying a lot of the healthy things that you should be eating by default. Because a lot of the things that you crave are in the aisles, but a lot of the really healthy stuff that I talk about eating is usually on the outside perimeter of the grocery store. And when I go to the grocery store, I shop at a store name called Aldi, and I go there and I spend about $45 to $50 per week, and I eat 10 meals per week here at my office. I usually just shop around the outside and then I am out of there in less than like 5 or 10 minutes. So for those of you who are overcomplicating this, all you really have to think about is what's some protein sources, what's some carb sources, some fruits and some vegetables and some fats that I like. I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to spend the money. I'm not going to be there very long, and I'm going to go home with everything that I need to help start to jumpstart this transformative process that I'm currently embarking on, which is improving your health. And the next thing would be to eat about 3 to 4 servings of protein per day. The next thing I have here on the list is 2 to 3 cups of grain. So that could be 2 to 3 cups of potatoes. That could be a cup of oatmeal, a cup of rice. a cup of quinoa, something that sits really well with you that again you enjoy and you can fit that into your life. And the last thing would be focus on really good quality sleep without over excessive stimulation of stimulants. And that's what I would start with if I was trying to create a program with somebody that didn't want to track their macros. I'd set them up on that foundational base to start with, and we would move forward from there, beginning to stack wins every week. And last but not least, this is question number 7, and it's all about aggressive dieting, getting super aggressive. How aggressive is too aggressive, right? Coach Will, do you recommend very aggressive diets? I'm going to say this. I am more a fan of more aggressive jump starts than I probably have ever been. Primarily because I think that a lot of people just simply need a victory. They need a win. They need something in the beginning of working with a coach where they can feel confident with. So for reference, if somebody comes in to work with you or somebody comes in to work with us and that individual's already overweight, right? They're looking for a win because chances are they've been trying to do the same thing, whatever they're doing, and it's not working for a long period of time. They're tired. They are sick and tired. Literally, they are sick and tired from feeling the way that they feel. So what can we do to get 5 pounds off of them? What can we do to get 10 pounds off of them? Hell, what can we do to get 20 pounds off of them in the fastest way possible to help them gain the confidence that they need to follow through and lose that 30, lose that 40, lose that 50? So what I'd recommend is doing something a little bit more aggressive in the beginning. I'd probably want to have them, follow more of like a rigid meal plan structure where we're having protein at each meal, we're having carbohydrates around training, we're maybe having fats and vegetables in the meals that are not around training, and we're also having them implement cardiovascular exercise, maybe even every day. It just depends on how aggressive you want to go. Now, the removal of carbohydrates from breakfast and from the end of the day will likely place that person into a calorie restriction, and then you're fueling their body with carbohydrates when they need them, which is in the workout time. All right. So you by default are placing them into a calorie restriction, which should help them get out of the land of insulin resistance, help them get into the land of insulin sensitivity. And then by you getting them actually doing cardio, riding a spin bike, doing an elliptical, whatever kind of cardio they like, you are going to be able to see them start to lose body weight and feel better because they're actually showing up. And by them showing up, they're building confidence. And then once they have improved their insulin resistance and now they're insulin sensitive, guess what you can do now? You can pull out another tool out of your tool belt and you can say, all right, now that you've lost your first 20 pounds, congratulations, this is so incredible. And again, celebrate them every 5 pounds because they need a victory. They need a win. Once you've gotten them down 20 pounds, then what do we need to do? Maybe we need to start implementing some carb cycles. Maybe you give them 1 high carb day a week or 2 high carb days a week because now that body that was once insulin resistant, guess what you did? You just reversed insulin resistance. You reversed type 2 diabetes, and now their body can actually absorb the carbohydrates you're putting in, and it can actually fuel their metabolism, and you can keep helping them lose body fat in a healthy, non-restrictive way. So do I believe in restrictive diets? At this point in time, I'm going to say if you do it right, I think it's one of the most powerful tools that we have as a coaching organization or a coaching staff.